Good afternoon, CETL podcast listeners. Tony Pellegrini here with our Teaching and Learning podcast series at Southern Utah University. Looking to explore and investigate great teaching, great learning opportunities that we enjoy here at Southern Utah University. Today's guest, we've got Rachel Bolus visiting with us today. And she's won an award last year from the Provost's office. And I want to turn a moment or two over to Rachel and have you tell us a little about yourself. Would that be okay, Rachel?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I'm Rachel Bolus. I'm an assistant professor of biology here. My area is ecology. I also teach general biology and ornithology, which is the scientific study of birds. So I also do a lot of research with students. So we meet regularly and talk about research, grad school, culture of science. Last year I counted I had worked with about 20 students at some point or another with one of those issues. And we work collaboratively together too on a number of projects, mostly in the areas of animal communication and habitat selection. And then for the university, I also feel very lucky to serve on the faculty senate, and I'm also the College of Science representative for the CETL advisory board.
Boy, and leap tall buildings with a single bound, right, Rachel? Rachel, thank you so much for that overview. I am an old English teacher, and so I've got to start with a question about your teaching philosophy. Do you have a philosophy? Could you share that with us? How did you come up with that philosophy? Is it an ever-changing philosophy? Would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, certainly the ever-changing is the best way to talk about it. And I kind of have to back up and say my philosophy about teaching philosophies, because that's even ever-changing. One thing is I didn't really write one until I was well into grad school when I was thinking about applying to jobs, because that's what you do. You need a teaching philosophy as part of your application. But then when I finally did it, I said, I really wish that I'd been asked to write a learning philosophy, like as an undergrad, as I was just starting everything, because it seemed that thinking deeply about learning was really important to thinking deeply about teaching. And then having a philosophy about both of those gives kind of a roadmap for everything that you do and adds value to both. So I think a lot of the students that I see, and when I was a student, you have an underlying learning philosophy, so you know what you hope to get out of your college degree, but you may have never articulated that. And I think that, and some of these philosophies you may have inherited from society and you haven't really thought deeply about it. So I think it's important to kind of think a little bit deeply about what education means to you, both as a learner and as a teacher. So what is the purpose of evolution or of education? And then how does it enrich our lives? How does it help us be citizens of the community? Like all the different facets of it. I think that it helps us to become better learners, to think about that a little bit more deeply. And mine's constantly changing, my teaching philosophy, because I feel like I'm still a learner myself. I still have plenty to learn about teaching. Part of my current teaching philosophy is to teach in a way to help all of my students achieve their goals, even though there's lots of different kinds of goals that they have. And I do this by considering their varied learning philosophies, their learning styles, and their different goals altogether. And then another big part of my teaching philosophy relates to my view on education overall. So I don't feel like my job is to take knowledge from my head and put it into my students' head. I think that it's important to teach them how to find, explore, analyze, create knowledge in different ways. And because I feel like my job is to get the ball rolling, and the education is really what happens inside of the students in unique and personal ways. So it's mostly about them, and I'm just a facilitator of that. I generally do cover a lot of topics in my classes, not because I expect them to memorize lots of facts, but so they can figure out what they're excited about. So I like to talk about inverts in great detail, and by that I mean invertebrate animals in great detail, really weird ones that live at the bottom of the seafloor, to my Gen Bio students. Think about things they haven't thought about, think about places they've never been, think about aspects of biology that may not be immediately apparent in their day-to-day life. And then they can find what it is that makes them really excited so they can dig in deeper. So I kind of see it like a trailer to their knowledge journey in my classes. And also, another thing is I try to teach students how to pay attention. So how to see the many birds that are outside your window, how to see the shape of a leaf, on a tree. I feel like we walk by a lot of knowledge without even realizing it. And so I try in all my classes to teach students to just kind of step back, pay attention, and focus on things. So that's a big part of my philosophy as well. I'm currently reading a book that I wanted to share too.
Please.
Yeah, so it just got me a new idea for my teaching philosophy, which, like I said, is evolving all the time. So the book is called Braiding Sweetgrass, and it's written by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she is also an ecology professor. And it describes her in the biography as a mother, scientist, decorated ecology professor, and enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi group. Potawatomi group nation. So she takes all these different ways that she knows to entwine these perspectives to explain how she can learn about plants. So it's not just one way. She thinks about plants in many different ways. And it's a really beautiful book. So at one part, she talks about how she listens to the different sound that rain sounds on, say, a pine tree versus an oak tree. And it just like blew me away to read that description. And she also helped me articulate this unspoken thought of my own teaching philosophy. So she has a chapter where she's out with her students doing a lot of things I do, like in boots in the mud, looking at the different living things. And she said, this is our work, to discover what we can give. So isn't this the purpose of education, to learn the nature of your own gifts and how to use them for good in the world? And it just opened up all new pathways of thinking for me.
Oh, you've got me converted. You absolutely blew me away when you talked about the rain on different types of leaves. Oh my goodness, the rain that we had yesterday, a hailstorm on one side of the town, a light gentle rain on the other. How we live in a wonderful world, don't we?
We do.
You just have to enjoy it and keep learning about it. We're lifelong learners. I'm very, very grateful for that passion that you share. Another thing that I just wanted to comment on as well was your perspective about your philosophy changing. Yes, you're changing. The content that you teach is changing. But oh my goodness, and students are changing. You have different students today than you had 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. But oh my goodness, what COVID's done to us this year. Changes we didn't even see coming, or at least I didn't see coming. No. And with our environment and who knows what the future will bring. We've got to be ready and flexible to change so we don't get bent out of shape. Refresh me. How long have you been teaching here at SUU? Will you, Rachel?
Yeah, I started in 2016, so this is the beginning of my 5th year at
Wonderful. SUU. As a 5-year teacher, what is it that you love about teaching at SUU? Yeah,
well, teaching at SUU is a joy, and I've taught elsewhere as a grad student, and I enjoyed that there too. But the beautiful thing about SUU is SUU honestly values teaching and learning. And because of this, I feel like a lot of idealistic teachers that also really value teaching and learning have been drawn here. And these teachers not only like to teach, but they also like to improve their teaching as a community. So we get to have a lot of fun trying to improve together. So I really love my colleagues here and how excited they are. It's infectious for teaching. I also feel like a lot of the students are drawn here for the same reason. So they value their education. They're drawn here for this personalized, high quality education. And so this shared enthusiasm is a big part of why I love teaching at SUU.
And the students and teachers are just absolutely what it's about. I know we have such a beautiful campus, but the personalities, the passions that our faculty and our students have are very, very profound. In your department, can you talk to us for a moment or two about some of the contributions that you make to the knowledge base in your subject? You've got to be a part of a team over there, aren't you?
I am. We have quite, yeah.
Talk to us about that team and what part you play in that.
Sure. We have a great team, and we're one of the largest departments on campus. We have lots of different corners of expertise. The great thing about biology is it's huge. I mean, it's a study of life. So you can find many different ways to approach that. So we have people who approach it from the cellular biology method for physiology, and on all the scales and about lots of topics that you can imagine. So in my department, I'm the ornithologist, which is the bird lady. Ornithology is the scientific study of birds. And if I were to define myself as an ecologist, which ecology is a little bit broader than just ornithology, I would describe myself as a behavioral ecologist. So this is kind of where psychology and biology interface. And a lot of my research is on the evolution of bird migration and bird song. And most of my research actually doesn't happen in a lab at all. It happens outside. So I'm outside catching birds. I'm outside measuring plants. Or if I'm not outside, then I'm on a computer. So I do a lot of modeling, and I actually program a lot, do a lot of computer programming. So I have a master bird banding permit, which means I can catch identified and band birds. And that means I have a lot of weird specific knowledge. So like, for example, you can figure out the age of a pinyon jay by looking at the color of the inside of its mouth and looking at how its skull has grown up. So I have these weird little knowledge bits. And I also do a lot of computer programming. I can program in both R, which is a statistical programming language used by biologists, and also in Python. And so I use that a lot for statistics and modeling and to analyze the data. So that's something I do with my colleagues as well, help with statistics and programming.
Exciting. It's great to be a part of the team, isn't it?
Yes.
It really is. Can you talk to us about maybe some learning activities that you do in class to help your learners acquire the concepts that you want them to acquire?
Yeah, so my lectures, I make sure not to talk for the whole time. I don't like to talk for 50 minutes. I can do it. I could talk for a longer
You're
time.
doing great.
For sure. But I like to make sure that we do an activity every time. And this varies a lot. So sometimes we'll take a little moment to write. So to get our thoughts together and write down a paragraph. People don't think of scientists as writers, but we are. That writing is one of the most important things that we do to bring together all of our ideas. So we take some time to do that. Sometimes we do graph interpretation or hypothesis formation. Biologists don't just, we don't just memorize facts that somebody else, we create facts all the time by learning about the world through science. And so I teach them all the little ways to do that. How do we collect data? How do we analyze data? How do we be objective about that? And we can do that in class a little bit as well. And as often as I can, we use formulas or simulations to do that, to explore different models. So for example, we've used simulations to look at how natural selection works, how genetic drift works, to predict how populations will grow over time based on their life history traits. So how many offspring they have or how often they grow. We even model disease transmission. We did that this week, and it's obviously very pertinent to now. So how does disease spread from one individual or not? These are all important parts of ecology and evolution, which I teach.
Well, I think more important for our future as well, too.
Yes.
It's going to be a part of what we're doing in our lives as well.
Yes, definitely. That model that created the curve that we keep talking about, that's one that we modeled in class this week so that we could better understand why in the world is it a curve in the first place. So we've been playing with that this week.
Great questions. And you've already mentioned this already, but we live in such a beautiful world, such a beautiful environment here in Cedar. How do you connect your lessons to that beautiful world outside? It's got to be difficult for your learners. Let's get, like you said, let's get outside and see those, check out some of those birds. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, there's several ways. So in class, it's easy. I find ecology easy to connect to the real world. Sometimes I like to kid that ecology is a study of everything because it's a study of the effects of the non-living world on the living world. And that sounds like everything to me. And so it's easy to connect your real life to that because it connects to everything. It's the part where it's the big part of biology. And by big, I mean large scale, not looking at tiny little molecules all the time, but thinking about how those tiny little molecules have context, how it fits into the broader world. And so some of the things we cover in class include the water cycles. So we learn how water is used and conserved in Cedar City. In particular, I have a whole lecture just about Cedar City water use. And we also learn about we've been learning about the susceptible infectious recovered model that I just mentioned. So how do you create the curve? When talking about COVID-19. These are very relevant. I like to also make connections to medicine a lot. A lot of my students are pre-med. And so some of them go in there thinking, ecology, this isn't relevant to me. And it's like, actually, it really is. And not just because it is involved in your everyday life, things like water and disease, but also because when you take a topic from one area, like ecology, and apply it to medicine, you can look at medicine in new ways. So for example, if you think not just about killing a parasite in your body, but thinking about using mutualisms with other microbes in your body to kill that parasite instead of just, taking a medicine, If you think about it from a more ecological worldview, you come up with new ways to do medicine as well. So I like to say that. In my labs, 2/3 of the labs that I teach include field trips. So connecting the real world, we go to the real world. Not that you're not in the real world in the classroom, but we go out and we see what we're talking about. We measure and identify plants. We take soil samples. We catch insects. We find birds. We learn bird songs. So Southern Utah is a great place to do this. And in my ecology lab itself, we follow what's called the CURE model, which is the course-based undergrad research experience. And that means the whole lab is built around a project that we do collaboratively. So every student contributes data points. We end up with a huge data set that we can then crunch. And we're doing that in systems here in Southern Utah. So we've modeled, and I do this in collaboration with Matt Ogborn, because we both teach sections of this.
Mhm.
And so we have done ones where we look at how urbanization affects bird species numbers. We've done projects where we look and see if we can predict based on soil characteristics and plant characteristics where you can find, say, a pinyon pine across the landscape. So we have different projects that they do throughout the whole semester, where they start at the beginning of the project and go all the way through writing it up and presenting it as a collaborative group in the way that a real scientist would do it. So we used real methods, real ways of thinking, real science.
Absolutely wonderful. I can just love your passion for all things nature. I can see how students would be fascinated just to come in and listen to you and listen to your passion. And as we've identified already, we've got great learners here at SUU. They'll come in our classrooms, they'll smile at us, they'll nod their heads. Sometimes when they take their tests, they don't do very well. They'll leave the classroom going, and you go, now they must have got it. There was no frowns, no one looked quizzical at all. But when they take the test, not so well. What are some methods? Can you share some of the methods that you use to check for your students' understanding as you're teaching them?
Yeah, sure. One of my favorite ones is this assignment I started doing my first semester. I read about it in the Chronicle and I was like, hey, that sounds kind of cool. I'll do it. But it's just basically having them do a reflection once a week. Each student is required to do a reflection that they just submit online. It only takes them 5 minutes and it's very open-ended. So they can, the only instruction is they have to think about something we learned that week and then think about how it connects to their own life. So they have to say, okay, this week we learned about disease. How does that have to do with my own life? And they can do that by free writing. They can do it by writing poetry. They can do it by giving me photographs that they took and explaining that. It's really open-ended. They can do it however they want. And it's a fun way to kind of get to know them a little bit more personally, especially fun for the quiet students who never talk in class. We'll talk this way through this reflection. And also every week I get 100 instant pieces of feedback. Plus, depending on how many students I have in lectures that semester. And so every week I go through and read these. They don't take that long to read, but I get this snapshot where I can know what they're thinking, what gets them excited, what they don't quite understand, and then I can go back the next time and immediately address all those. So I can add more of what they're excited about. I can go over again what they don't quite understand. And this is in the moment. So student evaluations happen way too late. I get this feedback after and I can't do anything, right? They're gone. And so this way, every week I can adjust. And so I really like that. And they're fun to read. They have so much creativity. You can see how they're making connections. You can see how they're thinking about things deeply. Like they'll go and read other papers and tell you what they learned. And it's just a really fun way to interact.
Well, I think looking at that, I couldn't agree with you more. Looking at the positive components is what, that glass is half full. Oh my goodness, I can sense, by looking at those, I can sense the passion your learners have and being able to say, oh, we're really, next time in class, I love that you are appreciating birds or, what, I apologize, making it too simple here, but whatever it might be that you're teaching. But working on those positives is so much more motivating, I think, to learners than, oh my goodness, you guys are not getting this. I've got to give you the spoon feed you this or whatever you might do. Not that you do, but others might do. So I love that positive nature. We've already mentioned, that we have great students here, excellent students. What do you do with your learners, your students, to help them support one another? You mentioned you have a lot of biology and pre-med students. it can get pretty it can get pretty competitive out there for those grades in class. How do you help them support one another in their in each other's education?
You know, the pre-med, they can get competitive, but I don't see it. They help each other all the time. They're always out there studying their OChem together. And I don't know, maybe at the end of the day, you know, they all want to be the one that wins, but I see that, I don't know, we have great students. I love our students. I'd say, you know, I mentioned before we had that collaborative data set class, right? So I try as often as we can to have them work together. So if we have these daily assignments where they're doing a simulation, that they don't do it by themselves, that they're doing it together, working through it together. And in the case of that ecology lab, we have it so that they're working with up to 120 different collaborators in one semester. And so they're really having to help each other out and make sure that they work together. Also, I wanted to point out again, I have that research group, and I've really enjoyed watching them grow together and help each other out. So we have right now, I think 8 different projects that they're working on. And so each of those has a student leader, but then they all end up helping each other out. So if we need to go out and count pinyon juniper that weekend, we're going to show up and I'll do that. If we need to go measure bird songs and see how high and low birds are singing, they're all working together on that. So the student leader might be the one whose heart is really in that project, but they're all helping each other progress together, and it's a lot of fun to work with them.
I couldn't agree with you more. Rachel, our time's up for today. I'm very grateful for your willingness to share your perspective and passion. Any last minute words of wisdom for your peers, for future students that might be in your class?
I don't know. I would say I look forward to working with you, because that's the truth. I definitely do.
There are some great people to work with you. Rachel, thank you so very much. Friends that are listening, please reach out to Rachel if you need more information or more support. And I look forward to connecting with you across campus. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, everyone else.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome. Bye-bye now.